Morning, everyone. So we thought of discussing case scenario-based discussions in low-grade gliomas. So, introduction: simply, a glioma is a primary brain tumor that originates from supporting cells of the brain, glial cells. Glial cells are the most common cellular component in the brain. Three types of glial cells are there from which gliomas arise. So, most commonly, what we come across is astrocytoma and oligodendroglioma. Yes, ependymomas are there, but we'll be focusing more on astrocytomas and oligodendrogliomas. Okay. So, low-grade gliomas. How do they present? The presentation is mainly in the form of, generally they come as seizures, but it can be in a multiple varieties: increased intracranial pressure, endocrinological dysfunction, based on the location, neurocognitive deficit, something like that. But yes, sometimes they can present as headache also, but majority times it's a seizure. Okay. So does it matter knowing which is the presentation, with which the tumor has presented to the consultant? So yes, because generally most of the low-grade gliomas present with seizure. Okay, and neurological deficits is an uncommon presentation. Okay. So what the data says is seizures, patients presenting with seizures are associated with better survival, whereas patients with who present with functional deficits or neurological deficits, they are associated with poor outcome. Okay, so it helps you to helps you to predict the prognosis of the patient based on the presentation. So case scenario number one: a 56-year-old came with complaints of seizures and headache since 3 months. Okay, so probable diagnosis low-grade glioma. What is the least likely medication advised among these three? So, least likely medication advised. Someone said mannitol, Ultraset. Like, it will be better if everyone participates, because there is no point in just sitting there and listen to the lecture. No one knows the answers, and like no one will know the individual answers, so it's not a problem. Okay, so generally it's Ultraset. We generally don't advise. Okay. Second question, second scenario: a 56-year-old came with complaints of seizure and headache since 3 months. Probable diagnosis low-grade glioma. What is the workup of choice? CT brain, MRI brain, PET CT, SPECT. MRI brain. Any takers for PET CT, SPECT? Right now it's trending apparently. They're advising left, right, center. No PET CT. Okay. So the point is, based on the history, why low-grade glioma? Why not high-grade glioma? The question: is there any answer for this scenario? If the presenting complaint is seizure and not headache, vomiting, nausea, why we generally take as low-grade glioma? But why not? Why can't high-grade glioma present with seizures? So if seizures is the reason, but why can't a high-grade glioma present with seizures? Why, when the patient comes with seizures, immediately the first probable diagnosis is low-grade glioma? Anyone? See, a low-grade glioma is generally a slow-growing indolent tumor. Okay, so when the tumor grows slowly, it gradually occupies a space. So in the meantime, during the growth, it continuously irritates the surrounding parenchyma. So which is one of the probable cause for seizures. Even now, after all these developments and everything, still exact perfect mechanism for the starting, the initiation of epileptic seizures, it's not clear. So the probable reason is the slow growth and the continuous irritation around the surrounding parenchyma causes seizures. That is the most probable reason. But high-grade gliomas are rapidly proliferating tumors. So what they do is they grow very fast, and the fast growth leads to causing headache, nausea, vomiting. Yeah, definitely intracranial pressure. But majority times it's more headache towards headache and nausea, vomiting. Okay. So just in case, if the same patient had come with a history of trauma, what is your workup of choice? Same patient who came with complaints of uh, trauma. Okay. Fine. So still no one is saying PET CT. Thank you. So how do you manage this patient? Any patient who has probably low-grade glioma and came with complaints of seizures and headache, how do you manage? First, you need to see whether the patient, what are the symptoms of the patient, whether they are pressure effects or whether they are epilepsy attacks. So whether do they have this or not. First thing you need to see after the patient comes to you as a consultant, as a doctor is, you need to manage the symptoms. So if the symptoms are there, yes, what are the symptoms? The pressure symptoms or epilepsy. If there is no symptoms, only mild headache, the patient came with complaints of mild headaches in 6 months or 8 months or 9 months, and there is no relief with the conservative management, then yes, definitely you can go for MRI of brain if the patient is not responding to any conservative management. Okay, so how do you manage a patient with headache, vomiting, or a patient with epilepsy? Okay, definitely for seizures, you give anti-epileptics. Okay, but which anti-epileptic to give is the main question. Okay, so this is actually a quite complicated topic regarding the choice of anti-epileptic. The Cochrane review and meta-analysis data suggests that there is 3 points. First thing, there is no prophylactic role of anti-epileptic drugs in the management of low-grade glioma. The prophylactic, I say, if the patient doesn't have a history of seizure, there is no point in giving anti-epileptics. Point number one. Point number two, there is no standard anti-epileptic drug regime for seizure control in patients with tumors. No standard anti-epileptic drug. Second, third one, first generation anti-epileptic drugs have enzyme inducing capacity. Cytochrome P450 is induced. So this leads to the secondary drugs which are in the system of the patient for to them to go to subtherapeutic levels. So that is the reason first generation AEDs are preferably avoided. So the new generation anti-epileptic drugs, levetiracetam, is generally preferred. Okay, there are others which are zonisamide, lamotrigine, gabapentin, pregabalin, multiple things, but generally levetiracetam is preferred, mainly because of its favorable pharmacological properties and relatively good side effect profile, comparatively good side effect profile. Okay, if you see in the routine practice, there is a paper by Dr. Tejpal Gupta. They have come across, they have actually done a questionnaire-based review of practice of anti-epileptics all over India. Okay, among them 70%, 65 to 70% who answered the questionnaire were radiation oncologists, and still the radiation oncologists majority, or I think 65 to 70% radiation oncologists, 25% or 22% neurosurgeons. Still, the majority, the major drug which is used is Levipil, and surprisingly, the second drug which is most commonly used is phenytoin. Okay, the reason being, yes, Levipil is very good regarding its side effect profile. But compared to Levipil, the phenytoin cost of phenytoin is quite less. So the point is not to start the patient on good medication. The point is to make sure the patient continues the medication. So you need to look at the economic aspect also while giving the medication. But preferably, if the patient, preferably explain to the patient that Levipil is better, and phenytoin has significant side effects like hyperglycemia, multiple side effects. Okay. Second thing, to how to deal with cerebral edema. Generally, what we do is steroids, dexamethasone, because of its minimal mineralocathode activity, so less fluid accumulation, fluid retention, and IV medication is preferred for rapid relief. And second thing is mannitol. If you are going to admit the patient, if the side effects are severe enough, immediately in a combination of Levera and phenytoin be given. Currently, if the patient is responding to well to levetiracetam, there is no need for adding phenytoin. See, I would definitely say I would not advise phenytoin. If the patient can buy levetiracetam, I won't go with phenytoin itself. Okay, phenytoin has good side, a bit bad side effect profile, so I would not recommend that. Okay, so if the patient is going to get admitted and if the patient has severe side effect, severe cerebral edema symptoms or ICP symptoms, definitely you need to admit the patient, starting on IV Dexona, and along with that mannitol. I repeat, mannitol, the combination is it's a 20% mannitol in 100 ml bottles. It's given TID for 3 days, and most importantly, if the patient has been started on mannitol, please check the electrolyte levels. Electrolyte levels can fall down significantly in some patients. Yes, they will fall down at least to minimal levels. Like minimum amount of fall of electrolytes can also happen. But so better to track the side effect electrolyte levels. Okay, if the edema is or symptoms are not relieving with conservative medication with steroids and mannitol, then definitely VP shunting can be done if required. Okay, so workup. So if the patient everything has been controlled and there is no problem, then MRI is the standard of imaging for a case of probable low-grade glioma. Okay, so they are hyperintense on T2 imaging, hypointense on T1. Generally, I repeat, generally do not enhance with contrast administration. Okay, best if the tumor is enhancing, FLAIR is the best modality for checking the edema, and T1 is the best one for identifying the gross lesion. Okay. MR spectroscopy is one. Generally, you don't need to use much spectroscopy in low-grade gliomas because they are more like for grading. Okay. Increased choline, cell membrane, increased choline, low creatine, and low acetylcholine. They are more help in grade for differentiating between low-grade and high-grade gliomas. But the more important thing is diffusion tensor imaging. Okay, this actually plays a key role regarding planning for surgery. Okay, I'll tell you how. So, and one more thing is, if the patient has something like pacemaker, and the MRI can't be done because of metallic objects, okay, and the patient is claustrophobic and he can't be in the MRI machine, I'm telling you, 45 minutes of multiple times the sound keeps coming. For a normal human being itself, it is quite irritating. Imagine for a patient with low-grade or a brain tumor to be in the MRI machine for 45 minutes. Okay. In this type of patient, CT can be done. Okay, but only if the patient, if MRI is not possible, CT is preferred. Okay. So neuroimaging, so you can see on image A and B, it is hypointense on T1, and you can see gradually in EG, EFGH, everything, FLAIR and T2 series, you can see it is hyperintense. Okay. So see, this is diffusion tensor imaging. If you can look at the image here, so you can clearly see This is the tumor. Okay, and this tumor, so the fibers which are supposed to come from here are being pushed laterally because of the presence of the tumor. Okay, so this helps in planning the surgical excision exactly, so that too much of fibers, too much of normal tissue is not being removed. So this helps in localization or visualization of the fibers, white fiber tracts. So case scenario number 3. A 50-year-old came with complaints of severe headache, vomiting since 3 months. MRI shows 3 into 4 centimeter mass in the left parietal lobe, non-enhancing. What is the next step? CECT, MRI, follow-up MRI, biopsy, and surgery. Among these 4, what is your preference? Surgery. Okay. Biopsy. Surgery. 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 Biopsy. Biopsy. Surgery. Okay. Majority are going with surgery. Why not biopsy? I just want to know why not biopsy? Why surgery? Okay. Same scenario. When will you do a follow-up with MRI? This we will discuss later. But just remember, same scenario. Among the symptoms, among the presenting complaints or enter data, if one thing is changed, you can do a follow-up MRI. But we will discuss later when you will do a follow-up MRI. So you're saying that if the patient is symptomatic, we will do an surgery. Follow-up MRI if not symptomatic. So you are saying that if the patient is a 50-year-old with complaints of headache, vomiting, and 3 into no, and there is no symptoms, it's a 3 into 4 centimeters in the left parietal lobe. So still follow. Okay, follow up MRI. Okay. So I think we should do a biopsy. See, yes, I agree there is increased ICP, but still, before, if the tumor is in the left parietal lobe, it is not in an quite eloquent area where the biopsy can't be done. It is not deep-seated lesion. Okay, if that is the case, definitely I think we should do a biopsy. Biopsy proof is definitely required. Okay, first thing is biopsy gives you a histological diagnosis, and this importance of doing a biopsy has become even more important with the advent of stereotactic biopsy, where the side effects are quite less even after doing a biopsy. The introduction of molecular classification, okay, and the data saying that not all non-enhancing gliomas are low-grade gliomas. Okay, so we'll talk about the importance of molecular classification and why biopsy is required in the later part. Okay, so does everyone agree with this, or should we do further discussion? That we will do later. But is everyone happy that biopsy should be done, or any still we should go for surgery? Okay, there are still people for surgery. Good, good. Okay, fine. The common ILC markers which we do after doing a biopsy is IDH1 and 2, which give a information prognosis for better survival, and IDH1 and ATRX for positive, even better survival in grade 2 gliomas. 1p19q deletion, which is gives an information regarding better response for chemotherapy. P53, it's a bit negative prognostic feature where there is a chance of progression to secondary GBM, methylation of MGMT, better response to alkylating agents like temozolomide. Okay, so this is our flow chart. If the patient is astrocytoma, oligoastrocytoma and oligodendroglioma, or anything like that. So you have an IDH1 mutation, you will do the mutation test. If it is mutated and wild type, that is about differentiation. If it is mutated, you go for further analysis where you will see whether the patient. Can I do full screen? Oh, sorry. Is it better right now? Yes. Okay. So we have 1p19q deletion and ATRX TP53 mutation. So we check for these. Okay. ATRX, if it is lost, it becomes astrocytoma. If it is 1p19q deletion is present, it becomes oligodendroglioma. Okay. So these are definite for confirming the diagnosis. And most importantly, IDH wild type. If IDH mutation is not present, okay, there is a still controversy regarding if the IDH is wild type. Okay, it will become diffuse astrocytoma, wild type, whatever designation it has been given to it. But the point is, how do you manage it? Okay, so from what I have read, it is saying they say that you should manage an IDH wild type glioma like a GBM. Okay, so this is what I have read. Okay, and one second. Case number 4, 52-year-old came with complaints of severe headache, vomiting, 3 months. MRI shows 2 centimeter mass in the left parietal lobe, heterogeneously enhancing. Biopsy was suggestive of low-grade glioma. Patient is fit for active treatment. What is the next step? Surgery. No one is saying chemo radiation. No radiation. Even surgery. Okay, fine. I think this is very clear. So treatment options for a low-grade glioma, they include surgery, observation, and radiation. Okay. So initially the question will come as why operate rather than going for chemoradiation. First thing is tissue diagnosis. Surgery improves the overall survival. Okay. And if there is a chance of malignant transformation, even if there is a chance of, sorry, even if there is a chance of malignant transformation, so that removal of tumor, completely removal of tumor from the brain will remove the delay the chance of a malignant transformation. Control of epilepsy can be achieved, which will lead to improvement of quality of life, and completely removing the tumor can make it as can create huge amount of control, like good control over the tumor. Okay. Second thing is this data can be extrapolated is from RTOG 9802. The RTOG 9802, which we will discuss later, recommends more surgery compared to chemoradiation. Like extrapolation, it won't directly upfront say that you should operate. There is no data saying that surgery improves survival, but it can be extrapolated from RTOG 9802. Okay, so if you want to operate and if you want to remove, so one set of data says that the entire gross total dissection is preferred, but gross total dissection is not always possible. So you need to do as much as possible, you need to resect the tumor. So is there an impact of extent of resection and improvement in overall survival? So there is no randomized controlled trials, but there was a paper by Hardesty et al. Actually, they analyzed 11 studies, among which they understood that the 5-year overall survival improved with increasing the extent of resection. So we should always aim for resecting the maximum amount of tumor, but should we resect everything, or should we resect without compromising the functional, like without compromising any patient functions? Like if you remove too much of the tumor, it can cause some sort of impaired functional outcome. So that should not be done. So yes, initially the plan was gross total resection. There will not be any visible lesion after the surgery is done. Okay, even the post-op MRI, but it's not possible every time. So what we have found, what we have started doing is maximal safe resection. So in this, the maximum amount of tumor is removed, but we make sure that just because there is some amount of tumor left, to resect it, if you resect that small 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeter tumor, it can lead to damage to the some fibers in the patient's brain, leading to, for example, paralysis of leg, weakness of limbs, something like that. So that should not be done. Okay, that is maximal safe resection. Subtotal resection is, one second, sorry. Subtotal resection is where uh, you resect the tumor, but the tumor amount of tumor visible is more than 1.5 cc. Okay, it doesn't matter. It is 1.5 is just 1.6 cc or anything like that, but it is more than 1.5 cc. It is subtotal resection. Okay. Yes, there are arguments regarding the amount of tumor left. Some say 1 cc, some say 2 cc, some say 3 cc, but generally accepted is 1.5 cc. More than 1.5 cc, it is subtotal resection. Okay. So case scenario, next case scenario, 35-year-old came with complaints of seizures and vomiting, 3 months. MRI brain, 2 into 2 centimeters in the right frontal lobe, non-enhancing. Biopsy was suggestive of low-grade glioma. Patient underwent gross shoulder resection. Post-op HPV was suggestive of low-grade glioma. What is your next step? Actually, you'll have a list of 5 questions. So just be ready to remember, so that we'll have a discussion together regarding all the scenarios. 5 scenarios back to back. So 72-hour follow-up MRI. Majority are going with MRI. Okay. Oh, radiation. Very good. Next. MRI. So I don't want this discussion to be like a class where I will talk non-stop for 1.5 hours, and people will listen banging their heads for 1.5 hours. I would like people to involve in the discussion, answer the questions. That's it. Okay. Next case scenario, 56-year-old came with complaints of severe headache, vomiting, 3 months, MRI brain, 23 centimeters in the right frontal lobe, heterogeneously enhancing. Biopsy says low-grade glioma, GTR done. It is confirmed as low-grade glioma. What is your next step? Please read the question again. Okay. Waiting for answers. Like, there are no two options. There is only one option. Only one answer. Okay. Okay. I think there is a varied answer for this question. Interesting. Okay. I think 1, 2, 3 are favorites. I think 2 is getting the maximum votes. Number 2. Okay. 2, 1. Anyone else? Done? Okay. A 45-year-old was evaluated with MRI brain, showed 4 into 3 centimeter mass in the left parietal lobe, heterogeneously enhancing. Biopsy says low-grade glioma, MSR done. Post-HP is low-grade glioma. Post-op MRI shows 3 cc residue. What is the next step? CTRT. Okay, next. Radiation. Okay. Two, 1, 2, 3, 1, 4, 1, 1. Okay, 4. I think radiation and chemo radiation are getting maximum votes. Anyone else? Come on, people. Okay, I think that's all, everyone. Next scenario, 39-year-old with complaints of weakness of leg. MRI brain shows 5 into 6 centimeters, right frontal lobe, heterogeneous enhancing, low-grade glioma on biopsy, MSR done, post-op HPE is low-grade glioma confirmed, post-op MRI says 3 cc residue. In this, what is your plan? It is not exactly like the old one. There is mild modifications. 1, 4, 4, 4, 1, 4, 4, 4, 4. Okay. I don't understand. 41 people are there, not even 20 messages. I won't tell anyone that you have voted for this option. Okay. CTR. Okay. Okay. 50-year-old with complaints of weakness of right leg, MRI brain, 5 into 6 centimeters, left frontal lobe, and heterogeneous enhancing. Biopsy was suggestive of low-grade glioma. Patient is not fit for surgery. Not fit for surgery. Next step. I think 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 1. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm. Radiation and chemo radiation followed by adjuvant chemotherapy got the maximum votes. Okay. So, in conclusion, you have 5 votes. Okay. Sorry. So, in conclusion, you have 5 conditions, 5 scenarios. A 35-year-old with gross total resection, 56-year-old with gross total resection, 45-year-old with 3 cc residue, 39-year-old with 3 cc residue. Last one is inoperable tumor. Okay, so let's go to the discussion. This actually regarding the radiation, last one. We'll just finish this. 60-year-old came with complaints of seizures and vomiting since 3 months. MRI brain says 6 into 3 centimeters, right frontal lobe, enhancing low-grade glioma on biopsy, GTR done. Post of HP is low-grade astrocytoma. What do you do? You want to radiate immediately at progression or chemotherapy, and the dose 45 gray or 59.4 gray. This is a simple question regarding timing and dose of radiation. Timing and dose. Yeah, there is still fight between early radiation and radiation progression. Okay. Fine. Okay. If it's the same scenario, but the options are immediate radiation or radiation progression with dose at 64.8 or 50.4, or you don't want to irradiate and just give chemotherapy with TMZ, temozolomide. So what do you want to do? Immediate radiation with 50.4. Radiation at progression at 50.4. I think we should have a good debate regarding URTC 82844 and 8245. I think that should be a good debate. Okay. One more. If it is the same scenario, but please read again. If the same scenario, immediate radiation or radiation at progression, please read the doses. 64.8, 50.4, 54. Please read the options. I repeat, read. Okay. Good amount of people have already replied. Okay, chalo. Let's discuss. Okay, step by step. Low-grade glioma post-op. Should we irradiate or not? That is the first question. Okay. So what is the pro and what is the con? Like, should you it improves time to tumor progression. One plus point. There are no systemic side effects, and the treatment time is defined. It's 5 to 6 weeks, nothing more. That's it, done. But against radiation, first thing is there is no evidence of improving overall survival. First thing, okay, with giving immediately radiation or at progression. Okay, but if you give irradiation, for a patient in the early time, not at progression, you are causing neurocognitive neurotoxicity. Like neurocognitive decline is a high probability. That is one question. That one point. Okay. So the data suggesting saying that you should radiate, you should not radiate is not like in my opinion. It's more like a debate of sorts from long time. There was in favor of radiation, Gannett et al., Vallonnet, Marquette, they actually said there is benefit of giving radiation. And people like Shah, Bollard, Nizaret, they said no, there is no benefit. But there are studies from Market et al. And Selly et al. Who said RT is beneficial in some, but not in all patients, especially if gross tumor resection has been done. This was a comment by Market et al. And not in patients with indolent tumors. Comment by Selly et al. This was done in 85 and 94. At that time itself, there was a discussion that it is not beneficial in everyone, especially not in these patients. Okay, so you have enough evidence to say it is not beneficial in all patients, and you have evidence to say there is significant toxicity. So the big question is who should get irradiated? Okay. Historically, we were looking at patients who needs to get irradiated from Pignati et al. Point of view. Okay, so this was the first data which said these are the patients at with who are having poor prognostic features or risk factors. We should consider irradiating them. Okay, so there this data is from URTC 22844 and 22845. The factors are age more than 40. Remember that age more than 40, astrocytoma more than 6 centimeter size at presentation, tumor crossing midline, presence of neurological deficit. I think I think you people remember that I told that having neurological deficits is a poor prognostic feature in the starting itself. Okay, so remember 3 points: 40 years, 6 centimeters, neurological deficit. Okay, next. So this is the Pignati et al. And the conclusion was 2 or less than 2 factors, if present, are designated as low risk. If it is more than 2 risk factors like 3, 4, 5, it is high risk. Okay, so the data was saying that low risk patients survive on a median overall survival is 7.7 years, and high risk patients survive till 3.2 years. Okay, so let's dig deeper regarding the prognostic factors and their impact on survival. Okay, so there was a retrospective data from University of California. So they said these are the factors which had impact on overall survival and PFS. One is tumor location. If the tumor is located in an eloquent area, you can't completely remove it without causing significant damage to the patient. So you won't remove completely. That is one. KPS less than 80, definitely. That is one. Age more than 50 and tumor size more than 4. Okay, if you remember, the Pignati et al. Was saying age more than 40 and the size was more than 6. It has changed to 50 and 4. Okay, please remember this. And then obviously, if the one data has come, the next data will come, which said that RTO from data, RTOG from RTOG data, impaired baseline neurological status. Neurological deficit are present at the time of presentation. Shorter time since first symptoms, astrocytoma, and tumor size of 5 centimeters. So 4 became 5, 6 became 4, 4 became 5, and neurological deficit was even there. And they said early radiation therapy was correlated with improved PFS again, but had no impact on OS. Okay, next. Then came RTOG 9802. So this data completely, it's like creating a huge controversy regarding selecting patients for radiation. Okay. So it simply says if the patient has more than 40 years, okay, and resection has been done, it is high risk. If the patient is less than 40 years, subtotal resection or biopsy, it doesn't matter, high risk. So at the end of the day, you take any patient more than 40 years as high risk, and less than 40 is generally a low risk. But if the patient has undergone only subtotal resection or a biopsy, then that is also a high risk patient. Okay. So after listening to all this, the next question that will come into your brain is, can we not irradiate? Can we not observe the patient? Yes, there are a set of patients who can be observed. Those patients are, if less than 2 or low risk patients from Pignati criteria, completely resected pilocytic astrocytoma, and patients with less than 40 years and gross total resection has been achieved as per RTOG 9802. And if there is an incidental glioma on a routine MRI for having some doubt or fear of having some brain tumor and it is asymptomatic and incidental glioma, you can observe the patient, do a surveillance. So what is the data? So you have your data regarding should we irradiate or not, whom we should irradiate, whom we should not irradiate, okay, and then whom we can observe. Right now, we will talk about when should we irradiate. Should we irradiate at early irradiation or delayed irradiation or a dose? What is a dose? Okay. So textbook material, EORTC 22845, 22844, NCC. So these is a data. These are the early phase 3 trials which were assisting regarding the indications of radiation. Okay. So first one is 22845. This is the study which evaluated whether should we radiate immediately after surgery or at progression. Okay. So it found that there is no difference in overall survival, and but improved progression-free survival with early radiation. Okay. So 7.2 years or 7.4 years, no change in overall survival. Hello. Fine. Okay. Okay. So this was the next trial, which was randomized control trial, 22844. It actually looked at should we irradiate the tumor at a lower dose or higher dose. So the question was, if you give higher dose, it will improve the local control and progression-free survival. Okay, so you can see once the data came out, it was clear there is no difference between irradiating the patient with 59.4 gray versus 45 gray. No difference in overall survival and no PFS benefit. Okay. The next trial was ECOG NCCTG trial, North Central Cancer Treatment Group, NCCTG. Even that showed 50.4 gray versus 64.8 gray. There is no difference in PFS and OS. Significant difference, there is nothing there. Okay. So then came the trial of RTOG 9802, where radiation was compared. So it's how do they actually stratified the patients based on the features like age and extent of resection. If the patient has less than 40 years and GTR was done, patient was observed. But if the patient is more than 40 and subtotal resection or less than 40 with subtotal resection, the patient was randomized to radiation. I repeat, radiation with 54 gray and radiation followed by PCV 6 cycles. Okay, so the initial data showed that the 5-year, this is a 6-year follow-up data, which showed that there is no survival advantage of adding PCV chemotherapy. But there is a trend in improved 5-year PFS. Okay, that was the initial data. But once the mature survival data came, which was a long-term data with 12-year follow-up, okay, it showed RT followed by PCV. It led to a significant improvement in median survival time compared to RT alone. 13.3 years versus 7.8 years. Improvement in progression-free survival 10 versus 4 years. The conclusion of that RTOG 9802 trial was simple. There is significant benefit of adding PCV along with radiation, which led to improvement in survival. Okay, that was the conclusion of RTOG 9802. So our discussion conclusion, like in-term discussion conclusion, is giving post-operative radiation. It achieves better PFS and seizure control. The typical radiation dose is 45 to 54 gray. Okay, no survival advantage of increasing the dose beyond 54 gray. RTOG 9802 has showed sequential chemoradiation is beneficial in high risk. I repeat, it is only in high risk LGG, low-grade gliomas. Okay. So the next question that will come is, should we add chemotherapy? Okay. So the data says yes, but what to add? RTOG 9802 says you should add PCV, and addition of that PCV chemotherapy leads to improvement in overall survival and progression-free survival. Okay, but does it benefit for all? Let's look at the data. Okay, so this is one. These are not new slides. These are the images from RTOG 9802, where on the left side you can see if the patient is having oligodendroglioma and operated, addition of PCV to radiation led to significant improvement in overall survival and significant improvement in PFS. But if the patient has astrocytoma, you can see there is a gap, but it is not significant. The p-value is 0.31 regarding overall survival, and regarding a PFS, it is 0.06, maybe marginal. I think we need to wait for the long-term survival data. Okay, so from these information, it is clear that addition of PCV didn't benefit the patients with astrocytoma. Okay, so what's the alternative? Okay, from what we know, we have only one option, that is temozolomide. Okay, temozolomide. One second. Sorry, temozolomide, which actually the advantage of temozolomide is mainly two. One is oral administration. The patient doesn't need to come every week or 3 weeks for chemotherapy. You can have the patient can have oral treatment. And second thing is, more importantly, better toxicity profile. Okay. So, and there are small phase 2 studies which have shown objective response regarding disease progression. Point case study that is shown is, it's a phase 2 study, RTOG 0424, which showed that compared to historical data, it is addition of temozolomide led to good amount of improvement in overall survival and PFS, 73.1% versus 59.2%, OS and PFS, it is more than historical data, which was with only radiation. But we need follow-up data, phase 3 studies, especially phase 3 studies. So once the phase 3 data comes, then only we can comment on the role of temozolomide, addition of temozolomide with radiation. So this is the conclusion of that aspect. So let's go to the case scenarios. I don't know how many people have answered for this question. Case scenario where GTR has been done, HPV was suggestive of low-grade glioma. Is everyone okay with this answer? Follow-up MRI. Is it mandatory to check MGM2 mutation before temozolomide? See, I think that I forgot that referral book. I think there is a standard book in I forgot the name. Pathology for pathology post-graduation level. There is a book which they read like our parents. In that book, they clearly mention that there is a statement clearly saying that see, just because you have taken a small sample of the tumor tissue and checked it for MGMT status, that doesn't mean that that small sample is not indicative of the MGMT status of the entire tumor. Even if you analyze the entire tissue, there is a chance that 50% of the tumor may not be positive or may not be negative. Generally, you don't do before starting temozolomide. You see, practically, it is better if you do MGMT mutation, definitely. MGMT, if you do, very good, because better prognosis. And I think there is a paper regarding GBM also. If you do MGMT status, the survival has doubled. Okay, but it is not done routinely. In a practical setting, if the patient has to be willing to pay the extra bucks, if the patient is willing, definitely. Entire panel, IDH1, 1P19Q, ATRX, MGMT, best. Okay. Prefer to do it, but if the patient is not willing, even after counseling, not required. Okay. Why not CT scan for follow-up? See, generally a neurosurgeon, after surgery is done, he will do definitely an MRI, maybe a CT scan. Okay. The reason for definitely doing an MRI is you need to check if there is any residue left after surgery. CT scan is generally done if there is any bleeding, post-surgery any bleeding is there, to check that the CT scan is done. But CT scan, MRI is on a higher level, on a preferential basis. MRI is preferred more than CT scan for follow-up or checking the residue. So anyway, preferably MRI, then CT scan. So among these options, definitely an MRI. So the next one, 56-year-old complaints of severe headache, vomiting since 3 months. Even after gross total resection and low-grade glioma, I think we should do radiation followed by chemotherapy. Does anyone has objection to this? I think we, after discussing, I think it should be clear. Or if it's not clear, we will have a discussion on that only. Anyone can comment? Hello? Not clear. Okay. So what is the high risk feature in RTOG 9802? Yes, exactly. So you have 56-year-old patient, okay, 52-year-old patient, and then the patient. Oh, sorry, I think I forgot to change the option. Yeah, I think regarding this 72-hour follow-up MRI also can be the answer. I forgot to change the option. But if you have a 56-year-old, even after going GTR, based on RTOG 9802 data, you need to give the patient radiation followed by chemotherapy. Okay. 45-year-old with residue of 3cc, radiation followed by chemotherapy. Any notes regarding this aspect? Okay. And 39-year-old with 3cc residue, same answer. See, I am just waiting for a reply because there is no point in having a discussion if you are not clear with the concept. Okay. So if you are not clear, we will do a discussion again. Once it is very clear, then we'll go ahead. Okay. Fine. So yeah, this is one tumor. Patient is not fit for surgery. Yeah, this is one question which have got a varied answer. Yes, we should have a discussion about this. Patient is not fit for surgery. I think multiple people have said chemoradiation followed by chemotherapy. Yeah, I would like to talk about that. Even after the discussion, any doubt about that? After the discussion, if okay, thank you. Any other people who have is there any scenario where we can use concurrent CT? Okay. See, the reason I'll tell you. Okay. In practice, what we do is concurrent chemoradiation. That's why I actually put this question so that we'll have a clarity regarding the data versus practice. Okay. As per RTOG 9802, if the patient underwent only biopsy, irrespective of the age, if the patient underwent only biopsy, the patient should be given an irradiation of 54 gray followed by sequential chemotherapy using PCV. Okay, so that is what RTOG 9802 says. But what happens in reality is, or generally what we have seen is concurrent chemoradiation with temozolomide followed by adjuvant chemotherapy. That is what happens. Okay, I completely agree. But if this scenario is given in any seminars or any good forum discussions, I think the answer based on data will be radiation followed by chemotherapy. Okay, but in practice, what happens is chemoradiation with temozolomide followed by chemotherapy. 6 cycles or 12 cycles, that's up to there is no data on that. This is only empirical information regarding temozolomide. Till the phase 3 data comes, there is no clarity on that, but that is what happens. Any further questions on this aspect? So what, if anyone is practicing or if anyone is has seen any other different practice, you can comment so that I can learn. 45 versus 54 gray. Yeah, so regarding that, my point is simple. Okay, the most recent data is RTOG 9802. Okay, and if you correlate with the earliest data, which is IORTC 22845, regarding the early versus delayed radiation, even in that it was 54 gray. But just because what happened is between 844 trial and NCCTC trial, they compared 45 gray and 50.4 gray. So the conclusion was 45 to 50.4 is enough. Okay. So what I personally what I do is, even the earliest data says 54 gray, and even the latest, which is RTO 9802, even it says 54 gray. I think I would prefer 54 gray based on the data available compared to 45 gray. That's it. Any direct comparison between PCV and temozolomide? From what I read, no. Any role of stratification to oligodendroglioma and astrocytoma and deciding between PCV and temozolomide? See, if the patient has oligodendroglioma, you should give PCV. Okay, but the problem here is, even today, the RTOG 9802 trial has created so much confusion regarding this. Okay, standard is PCV. Okay, but majority are not ready to go with PCV, but still they want some data to come regarding temozolomide. Okay, as of now, data says you should give PCV. People are not ready to move on. Okay, so I think this 45 gray is clear. Immediate radiation with 45 gray. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, this I wanted to have a discussion regarding this. See, if there is no benefit regarding overall survival, there is no point in giving the treatment. This is what we have been taught in our institution, in our hospital by our seniors. Okay, what I would like to say is, this is not a statement, or this is not a data supported point. My simple my observation based on the treatment which we have last 7 years, what I see is, once you advise the patient, these are the side effects, these are the implications regarding giving immediate radiation versus delayed radiation, the patient will say, okay sir, I will come after progression. Okay, I'll come if the MRI says progression. Okay, but I would like to bring to your notice one simple point. Okay, how many of the patients which we have, which operation has, like surgery has been done and referred for radiation, how many of those patients come for routine follow-up? Okay, how many of those patients come for routine follow-up in a setting like ours? Okay, yes, I agree. A lot of patients, like there are significant number of patients who come for regular follow-up out of fear, out of awareness, something like that. But frankly speaking, patients, especially in not in cities, once you go to the semi-urban tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, or not well-educated people, okay, what happens is they get busy in their own life, and they are busy with their own jobs and everything. So they stop coming for regular follow-up. So I feel that we should give earlier immediate radiation with whatever dose, 45 or 54 or 50.4 gray, and complete the treatment and then send them home. Okay, I agree. This is not a standard statement or evidence-based statement, but based on the practice, what happens outside in a practical setting, this is what I would recommend. Okay, if there will definitely be some if age more than 40, every time should be given RT. See, that actually, that is the reason I said you need, I think if you go for the previous slides, you will see I have not gone only with 40 years and small amount of residue. What I have done is I have tried to underline multiple factors. Okay, you should definitely take into consideration poor prognosis factors, you should definitely, especially the neurological deficit at presentation, more than 6 centimeters, definitely. Okay. So this, if you take into consideration, it's not only one, you should take into consideration multiple, but only 40 years. Okay. Only 40 years, I would definitely not give radiation. Only 40 years. You should take into consideration multiple factors. Even after RTOG 9802, I think you should go back to Pignati et al. And look at, see, even if you go to Pignati et al. And RTOG 9802, the benefit that is only going to come is progression-free survival. There is no overall survival benefit. But you need to look at in a different angle. Okay. So same scenario, but same. This is my opinion. This is not a evidence-based statement. I would definitely go for immediate radiation rather than radiation at progression in our setting. Okay. And regarding this, one of the questions in the comments, my preference is 54 gray rather than 50.4 or 45. This is my preference. You can argue 45 or 50.4, but my preference is 54. Okay. So I think this is at the conclusion. This is what after this presentation, this is what I think you people should know. Has any study used 50.4? Yeah, 50.4 was used by NCCTG trial, which showed 50.4 versus 64.8. That showed that 50.4 is enough, not more than 50.4. Any separate guideline for pediatric low-grade glioma? Yeah, definitely, because pediatric low-grade glioma, the approach changes because what happens is you will try to delay the radiation by giving some chemotherapy. Okay, but it's different. It's a bit different. I won't say 10-year-old best for immediately. You need to give chemotherapy, but 10-year-old also you can start radiation. But in a 10-year-old, I would, if possible, proton therapy, if possible. If not possible, yeah, definitely you need to give radiation. But the approach changes. It's not that simple. I would not go into pediatric low-grade glioma. Okay. So I think answers you should know after this presentation. Why do you treat a glioma in this way? That you should know. Okay. See, you should, after reading the data, I am not saying after listening to this class, you should do what I have discussed. You should go through the data and create your own opinion. Okay, especially regarding the approach towards radiation at progression or immediate radiation, that you should take a call. Okay, after considering the patient, how do you want to consider and how do you want to do it? Second thing, do you want to add chemotherapy and which to add? So based on the data that you need to decide. Okay, can we not treat a patient? That you should know. Okay, after listening to this, and what is the treatment algorithm? Okay, regarding the low-grade glioma, especially if the patient has IDH wild type, how do you want to approach it? Okay, so my request to you people is go back, go through the presentation or go through the data. If you want any trials, any articles, they can be shared in the group. So go through that and take a call. Okay. So any questions? Oh, thank you. Questions. Any doubts, questions? Okay, so I think if that is the one thing, actually, I wanted to ask about this. Actually, we are looking at whether to start radiobiology or whether to go into clinical oncology. So that is one aspect we want to discuss with people. Like, should we or should I go start a class of radiobiology, which I am thinking about doing? We are actually in the uh, direction of starting radiobiology group and everything. So, what are you people interested? Like radiobiology or clinical oncology? No, it's not radiobiology. Okay, so no one wants clinical oncology. Only one person is saying clinical oncology. Yeah. No. Clinical. Right now, there is a flood of radiobiology and suddenly clinical. Okay, we will try to balance. Okay. So next, we'll go with high-grade gliomas. We'll plan radiobiology also, but in the meantime, high-grade is okay. Or you want any separate discussion? Okay, high-grade. Okay. So if you have any other doubts, any further doubts, we can discuss in the WhatsApp group, or else okay. That's it for today. Thank you for attending. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the wonderful class. Thank you so much. It's always amazing, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Nice of you. Bye. Have a good day.